Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Harrold. Welcome to our Life with Breath Expert Series. And today we have the great Michael Susi with us. Really excited to be with you. Welcome, everyone. Today we have a real treasure for us to share his wisdom and awarenesses about the Global Health and Wellness Program. And we have the director of the LinkedIn Health and Wellness Program, the great Michael Susi, with us, an American treasure. How are you, Michael?
Ed, I'm going to try not to blush too much with that introduction, but thank you very much for it. It's great to be here with you. I'm really excited always to catch up with you. And thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, let's just start with the simple stuff. Let's just start with some math. You work for an amazing organization. I don't know how many workers you have, under your realm, but I know it's quite a big number. And you've been at this quite a while. So maybe give us a little backdrop of how you got here and what you're doing right now.
Sure. So we are about 15,000 people at LinkedIn globally. We have offices in, I believe, 19 countries, 32 offices over 19 countries. I've been at LinkedIn for 10 years. So when I started, we were about 900 people in our Mountain View office and a scattering of people in some other offices that we were just really starting to hit that hyper growth mode. Immediately prior to joining LinkedIn, I had begun my own wellness company that was really me to individuals. I would write exercise and nutrition programs for people remotely. So I was trying to, this was 2008-ish. I was trying to kind of turn that whole personal training, coaching paradigm on its head and remove that geographical need to be next to someone to be their coach or their guide through increasing whatever betterment they wanted to make within themselves. So that what I had started as an online company really became the wellness program at LinkedIn, just through connections. Need to say more about LinkedIn. Just having connections allowed me an opportunity to present what I was able to do and thought of as a corporate wellness program. And it's been a tremendous success, but more than anything, I really attribute that to where I get to do this, which is at LinkedIn. It's just a tremendous company that really, truly does care for its employees and its mission as an organization to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce is all about helping people enrich and better their own lives. And heck, that's what wellness is, just on an individual basis.
Yeah, you're so good at what you do. It's really hard to put words to it. You appear to be someone who can see the really big picture about what we're trying to achieve in global wellness, while at the same time not getting bogged down in the details and kind of the minutia of it all. And I know you have some roots back on the East Coast. Is that where you learned these skills?
I was living back east when I developed the skills, but I would tell you that the skills I developed that really drove all of this home was through an organization called the Czech Institute, founded by a gentleman named Paul Czech. And getting certain, so I've had a number of other certifications, from personal training, strength and conditioning, nutritional certification of metabolic typing, but it was really the education through the Czech Institute that I brought my vision, or helped me create the vision that really allowed this to be, how do we help people holistically achieve what it is that they want to achieve? And when you get into the corporate space, I grew up playing sports and being an athlete and a collegiate football coach for a cup of coffee, as they say, at a couple different universities. And when you get into the corporate space, not everyone's looking to run faster, jump higher, and get bigger and stronger, right? There's the more ubiquitous goals of, maybe it's losing weight, but even more commonly, it's how do I just get more energy, because life, work, relationships are stressful. And so that really brought it into focus for me to create a program that helps people unleash their greatness.
You have a pretty big stage that you work with, and I noticed you have a kind of a simplistic approach where you have 6 various platforms that allow us to homogeneously build this stage a little wider, a little higher every day. Could you just take a minute and go over, the 6 platforms that do make what you do extremely unique in the corporate workspace?
Absolutely. So, well, we call them the six tenets of wellness. And those six tenets are thoughts, breathing, hydration, nutrition, movement, and rest. And the analogy we make to help people get that, and it seems simple, but we have so much information thrown at us from a variety of sources, some accurate, some not, around how we should care for ourselves, that many times it needs to be made very simple for people to get. And so the analogy we make, because almost everyone has grown or killed a plant in their life, it's sunlight, soil, water. And everyone knows that if you give a plant those things, the plant does very well. Now, of course, not every plant requires the same of all of those three ingredients. And we as humans are a bit more dynamic, but we're common enough that we can have these six overarching principles, but we're also obviously unique enough that we need to understand how those individually work for us. What am I trying to accomplish in my life at this point in time, and how do I use those six tenets as a way to benefit me? I always tell people, you're doing all six of the tenets. How well you're doing them to support what you're trying to get done, well, that's really the $1 million question that we challenge people to discover for themselves.
I noticed you were way out in the foreground before it became, popular to really focus on things that might not be taking place at the workplace, like the power of sleep and a good night's sleep, the power of what we're putting in our body, little things like that, and how that creates the whole a little bit stronger from the bottom up.
Yeah. Well, what, I like to use this analogy around organizational health. And so the comparison is, if you think of an organization to the human body, where then the organization cells are the employees, and then we as people have our own cells, right? That organism, the human or the organization, the health of its cells dictate the health of the overall organization. So if a human body has some portion of it that is not healthy or well, the whole organism, the whole body is considered not well. And I think if you take that into an organization and you care for each person within the organization the way you should care for the cells within your body, that level of micro focus leads to great macro results, I think, personally, as our entire organism, but also organizationally.
So as you know that myself, everything that I do, whether it's in the corporate space, the athletic space, or the healthcare space, has something to do somewhere with breathing. And, I look at breathing as the be all end all, the beginning, the middle, the end. I look at it as supporting us from a physical standpoint, a mental standpoint, an emotional standpoint, a spiritual standpoint. Can you explain a little bit about what the breath has, if you care to, a little bit personally about how the breath has helped you, and then also how you feel, the need to spread this breath professionally is such a landmark tenet for you?
Well, I think one of the downfalls of breath is that we've done it since we were born, and we can very easily take it for granted because, one, we don't have to think about it, right? Our bodies just automatically do it. And it usually isn't until we suffer from some sort of breathing impediment, right? Whether it be that we get sick and don't feel well in that regard, or, something worse. But that level, until it's brought into our forefront, I think we just dismiss it as, or forget how influential it is. My first, I would say, foray into understanding the power of breath was really around athletics. And so it's, how do you perform athletically based upon just breathing better? So that ultimately, though, had to expand. And when you really think about how often we breathe, and I know you know the exact number, I don't off the top of my head, but when we, this is something that happens so often. And so while our bodies are so amazingly resilient that you can breathe improperly, and it's not just going to make you fall over, right? You're not going to just perish because you take a couple improper breaths. But every time we breathe improperly, as you know, it's a missed opportunity to actually create a restful moment in our day, as opposed to adding more stress through improper breathing. And what I most importantly learned, I would say the pathway into more fullness of wellness within breath went from initially athletics and then into meditation. So as I began to, and I've been practicing meditation for well over 20 years, not always very well. It's something I kind of would go in and out of. I would say the last 5 years of those 20 have been the time that I've been the most consistent with the practice. But that was the first way outside of athletics that I thought about breath. And you realize how powerful it is. And then you take it the next step and you realize how many signals it's giving you. And not only is it a signifier to you that, hey, something's wrong, you're not feeling your best, whether it be that you feel anger uprising because of an email you got or the way someone spoke to you. And how you then, not only is it a great signifier for you, it's the actual mechanism you can use to help calm yourself down or to energize yourself if you feel, a dullness in your activity level. So, that was the journey for me over time. And then going back to the education I got through the Czech Institute, they so much emphasize it and you put it into practice and then you actually do it for yourself. I would say growing up, being a competitive person, sometimes my competitiveness would get the better of me, which would lead to maybe saying or doing things that in hindsight I'm not that proud of. And maybe anger would even feel like rise up in myself. And it was through breathing practices of recognizing that you're feeling that level of stress. And before you take that action that you may regret, it's pausing and using your breath as a tool to check in with yourself, to calm down a bit. There's that saying I'm going to probably misquote it, but it has to do with, the space between the stimulus you receive and the response. There's a moment for breath in there, right? And we don't have to react in a fight or flight manner when we receive that stimuli. And what can you do with that space between the stimulus and action? Breathe. Just focus on your breath. And it does an amazing job, obviously, to help calm down or even get excited when you maybe need to get pumped up.
Well, that's a great analogy. When you think about stress, you think about kind of the absence of space. You feel like you're closed into your mind, or physically you feel like you can't perform any longer. Your mood is disrupted. And that breath just has the ability to create a little bit of space around the intruder or the stressor. Then you can organically kind of figure out a new path and create some space around things that normally take our breath away. So space might be the absence of uncomfortable stress.
Absolutely.
You guys do a lot of great mental health work too. And I know like the breath work is a big piece of catapulting the other 5 tenets that you have. Do you feel the breath work plays a role in what you guys are doing with mental health?
Absolutely. I think that obviously mental health has basis in wellness, but it obviously goes over into medical things as well. And just to sort of differentiate, wellness, the way we look at wellness, the way we practice it, it's all those things you can do preventatively that you don't need a doctor to go engage with to be able to do those things. And so in that regard, from teaching mindfulness, and we have a tremendous mindfulness and compassion team at LinkedIn, and compassion and mindfulness practice has been part of what we've done from a wellness perspective since day one. So that is something that we do a lot of, is helping people appreciate that level of compassion, practice compassion through mindfulness. And then it goes all the way to the other side, though, too, to actually supporting people's mental health through, counseling. So our EAP is offering people, we offer 25 free counseling sessions, for example, to our U.S. employees a year.
Great.
And our international employees have access to an EAP as well, similarly. And then even speaks, I'll give you a specific example, too, around supporting people's mental health. And knowing that everyone's on a different journey. You don't really know where people are exactly. And some people we range on that spectrum. But obviously when COVID hit, whatever stress we were already under just became heightened for almost everyone. And we actually created through our entire organization, but really coming out of our benefits team, was something called Lift Up. And so Lift Up are different opportunities that we create as an organization for people to take those mental breaks. We have 2 days a month that are no meeting days. We have a day back in November that we gave all employees off. And so those are foundations that then allow people to tap into other resources that we as a company provide, but also they may have access to just through their own occurrences, but allow them to work on their mental health and really care for it.
In my mind, there really is no other health besides mental health. It really doesn't matter what you see in the mirror. if you can't feel comfortable about yourself when you close your eyes. And I think mental health is something that we kind of push to the side, and really kind of get short shifts until maybe it's, a little bit past where we should have taken action. One of the great things about the brain is that it really can focus and reduce information to give us the most optimal answer for whatever is on our plate. And the brain loves to complete what its objective is. But in today's world, the COVID, the computer, everything's on Zoom now. We're not getting that human connection. The brain seems to have difficulty in changing gears when we don't complete something to the best of our ability because an email came in, or there's another Zoom conference, or there's a call over here. One of the things that I've noticed is that the breath control is a really important tool at the workstation to help the brain change gears on the fly, because we're all wearing so many hats today. Do you find that to be true?
Oh, absolutely. Two thoughts come to mind. One is around multitasking, which people think they multitask, but we don't. All we do is waste time. Really, when we're called upon is to be able to recenter our focus, right? That's really ultimately what we have to be able to do, because we cannot do anything to the best of our ability if we're trying to do more than one thing at a time. Things require our attention. And when you divert that attention by trying to do two things at once, you're not really getting much done. So it really is the ability to not allow distraction to come in, but obviously that's not possible all the time. Some things require us to take our attention from the task that we may be on, but it's the ability to refocus, multiple times over the course of a day or an hour. And so mindfulness, breath work does a tremendous benefit to a person to be able to develop the skills to, one, notice when you are distracted, and two, allow yourself to bring yourself into focus in that regard. So to me, it is without a doubt. And also to touch on what you said about it all starts with mental health. I couldn't agree more. You can have to boil it down to an even more simple equation. You can be the most powerful athlete in the world, but if you have, things aren't right in your head and you don't feel good, you're not your body doesn't allow itself to show all that great athleticism that sometimes gets hindered by, a problem that the person may be experiencing in their head. And so I definitely totally agree that how much everything really does start with, that's why we start with the thoughts tenet as our very first tenet, because everything begins with that thought. And when we can mitigate negative thought patterns, right, which obviously the act of breathing can do a great job of that, when we can stop those things from running amok, that's how we create better focus in our lives. That's how we stay on task. That's how we get things done. And then that just snowballs in a positive way, or that sense of accomplishment of checking those things off. The absence of that feeling like I'm forgetting something or I forgot to get something done. Those little bit of anxieties, when we remove them, right, that just gives us more power to be moving forward in a really positive direction. And something else, I'm sorry, I wanted to say too earlier about the breathing tenet. And I think it's related to the question you just asked now, is we look at our program as, we look at each of our 6 wellness tenets as an opportunity for someone to engage in the wellness program. So we can talk about the movement tenet. We can talk, and you're going to have some gym junkies and they're going to want to come to every exercise class you have, no problem. Not everyone is into exercise or going to the gym. Same with mindfulness. Some people love meditation and mindfulness, and other people either didn't have a good experience or don't think it's for them. I believe that with something like breathing, I can reach every member of our workforce with a skill set and a tool that they can utilize without having to engage with someone else, that they can be equipped with at their desk, that they can learn about via online, that we don't have to be in person. And again, it's just being able to recognize the signals our breath is giving us, and then to know what to do with that and how to use techniques that, as you did last year with our workforce, provide us great content on breathing techniques that our employees are able to tap into to use the breath as a tool to heal.
Well, life has evolved since we were kids to where we are today, that everything, or 90% of the things we're learning, is all through our eyes. And the 4 other senses aren't really being stimulated as much at home and at work. And when you think about this visualization, everybody wants to feel good, and, if you are going to the gym, you get the ability to take a look at yourself in the mirror. And there's a story there in regard to the investment, you've made in yourself. When it comes to the brain, you can't see the brain. You could be the smartest person in the room and you can have huge cognitive skills and the ability to handle many, many questions at one time and come out with a great answer, but you can't see the brain. And the brain is a totally different animal than everything else in the body. So if I fall off my bike today, there's going to be, I'm going to skin my, I'm going to tear up my knee, and I can see that, and the body will start to repair it. Well, the brain's a little different. The brain you kind of check in with your brain every 4 or 5 years. It doesn't really show you an injury right away. It doesn't show you a pattern of movement right away that maybe you can't identify as a behavior or a perception or an action that probably is not your best. So when you're working with the brain, and you have 15,000 people, but and they're all different. All the perceptions are different, but they're all kind of the same. And we all kind of have the same places where we stub our toe mentally. But when you think about what that inhale and exhale with conscious control can bring to the various centers of the brain, you've really got a good argument. Like, that's where we go to organize ourselves between our ears first.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the brain is challenging in that regard because, like you said, you can't see it. Fortunately, there has been some studies that can give people some tangible proof. Studies around how gray matter changes in the prefrontal cortex with a mindfulness practice. And so some of that can be supportive. What we try to really do with people is encourage them to check in with themselves, right? That's where that ability not to let it go 4 or 5 years before you really check in, but to do it as a daily practice. And then when people can see it for themselves or feel it for themselves, right, that is what actually manifests itself into them getting it and realizing that by doing this, they are receiving that benefit. Because you're right, that tangible, let me see this change. But to that, I'll also give you another example. When we work with people that say they want to lose weight or they want to talk about their nutrition, a lot of times, weight gain or weight loss is the indicator people utilize to show whether or not they're eating well for themselves. And we look to try to give them something a little bit more immediate, which is, you've eaten something. How do you feel now? Not waiting 6 weeks to see what a scale is like, because it's too long. One, people need more immediate feedback to understand the benefit. If they don't get it, they become disenchanted with it. And our human nature is to kind of throw our hands up and walk away from it. Or if it's the wrong thing, it takes us 6 weeks to figure it out. But when we can tap in the moment, and that comes with using our breath, but we can tap into the moment and say, I ate this food and now I feel anxious or I feel really groggy. Well, okay, let's look back and say that's that immediate feedback that our bodies give us that allow us to, correct in the immediate, as opposed to waiting weeks or months to make those changes.
That's a super cool awareness for everyone out there. Notice how you feel after you eat. And this will give you a clue about what you've eaten and is your body allergic to it. And if there's issues in your body, in other words, there's a mucousy, phlegmy type substance in the throat, your body's actually resisting on some level to integrate what you put in it. And there'll be inflammation, but that inflammation also comes up around the neurons in our brain, and it makes it difficult for us to think clearly. And sometimes there's like a foggy mind. So that's a great tip for people, Michael, is simply to notice how you feel after you've given the ego what it's asked for. Because I think a lot of what, we think like, okay, one piece of pizza is if it's okay to have one, then I should have two. I mean, sometimes your body, is craving a piece of pizza, but it's the quantity of it that sometimes jams us up.
Absolutely. And I'll share with you that we give people what we call four bodily navigation stars to tap into as a checklist. So and it can be used for anything, but to apply it to, when we eat, we encourage people an hour or two after you eat, you check in on these 4 bodily navigation stars of mental acuity, mood, energy, hunger, or cravings. And if you can't check all those off, like if you eat food and then an hour or two later you're hungry or you're craving things, that's a sign that you're not giving your body what it needs. And at the same time, if you eat something and you don't feel your mood uplift, I mean, food is our life force, right? And so when we feel an uplift, of mood, not just of energy, right? Because you can eat a bunch of Skittles and feel an uplift of energy. When you feel your mood enhanced, that's a sign that what you ate was good for you. If you feel your mood deteriorates or your brain is foggy or it's anxious, again, those are all signs that the body is not getting what it needs nutritionally. And you have to stop. You have to pause. You have to pay attention. You have to breathe and really understand what's going on with your body, because these signals aren't glaring and they're not coming to us into our native language, right? They're coming to us through these signals, and it takes time to pay attention and listen to them.
I don't think a lot of people know that when you talk about weight loss, weight loss is basically inflammation reduction. You're reducing inflammation in your body and you're circulating more alkalinity and oxygen. So your blood is cleaner, it's easier on your heart, you have more energy, and there's more quality thinking, less quantity thinking. But I think a lot of people don't realize that to reduce inflammation or weight loss, that 80% of weight loss comes from the lungs and 20% comes from exercise, sweat, urination, and evacuation of our bowels. So just getting people to stay on that exhale, even though you're at your workstation, you're actually in the gym inside your body doing what most exercise programs should be about, which is reducing inflammatory markers without causing any additional wear and tear to your muscles, bones, and joints.
Yep.
So, when we talk about, losing maybe a pound or two in the body, you're also going to lose a pound or two maybe of excessive overthinking in the head.
Yeah. Well, some of the things that come to mind around, weight loss and breathing, one of them, as you touched on, it was stress reduction, right? And when we can reduce stress responses in our bodies, we are putting our bodies in a position to lose weight. Obviously, techniques like checking in on your bodily navigation stars require some breathing. And the saying I remember, and I can't remember where I got it from, was fat burns in an oxygen flame. And so if you want to be burning fat, like, you need to have that right ratio of, oxygen needs to be, and that comes from proper breathing. So yeah, that's another, breathing is instrumental in helping people lose weight if that's their goal.
So as you know, I'm all about greatness, and good's not good enough for me. I want, greatness is where we should be shooting and raising that bar every day, because all of us on some level are getting into our own way. No one can see how great you actually are all the time, just showing up, doing the best you can. Do you have any examples about maybe how the breath tenet has actually helped folks get out of their own way and achieve greatness at LinkedIn?
Well, we look at greatness to be something that is obviously individual, what you're trying to accomplish. And you can accomplish that greatness across different things, right? We want to be great at our jobs. We want to be great, partners, parents. We want to be great maybe athletically for those that are still, doing things of that nature. So one is allowing people to bring their best selves forward every day. And that comes through, obviously, the opportunity to be able to focus on breath. I have heard stories that people have shared with us over the years of engaging in the program, from learning about mindfulness to exercising more regularly, to the breathing information that you and I brought to them last year. Was the culmination of all these things allow people to see for themselves what's in the way for them and to remove those obstacles and allow themselves to achieve that greatness. Over the course of last year, we did have a lot of people share their own stories about being able to calm down from anxiety or being able to prepare for public speaking through the breathing techniques that you were able to share with them. So those are the stories that I've really heard from people that allow them to let their greatness shine. We say everyone has greatness, right? It's inherent. It is inherent in us. We just need to wash away stuff. We don't need to instill greatness. We need to get those things out of the way so that our internal and inherent greatness shines through.
I know that you have a lot of information at LinkedIn, that you get through research and questionnaires and things like that. And, some of the major stuffs are sleep and stress and productivity, etc. Do you do anything in regard to looking at moods? We don't talk a lot about moods or attitude and how that plays just such a huge role in greatness.
Yeah. Well, to me, that comes back to compassion. And we have had, compassion has been part of our vernacular at LinkedIn from the day that I joined. Our former CEO and now executive chairman, Jeff Weiner, has done a lot around compassionate management. How do we as managers or people leaders, how do you do that compassionately? And how do you not confuse compassion for coddling? Letting people get away with things because, oh, I'm trying to show them compassion. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for someone in a workforce is even maybe let them go or open their eyes that there's somewhere else to go be if they're not doing well. So I think many times, it's hard to be compassionate towards others when our moods aren't in a good place. Whether that mood deterioration is because we're not getting good sleep or we're hungry or some other thing going on in our lives. So mood is instrumental. And to me, the way LinkedIn has really exemplified and helped people bring their focus to their mood is through the teaching of compassion and how you can apply that both as a colleague, a manager, a parent, a coach. How do you coach people up and do that in a way that helps drive them and be compassionate?
When I think about, the kind of the scope of all the work and all the employees that you have, there's got to be a way that you must do it in a very kind of seamless way. But, feeling connected, especially during this time of disconnect where we're not connecting live, because I'm a human being junkie. I got to be around people. I love being with folks and seeing the smiles and the hugs and the pats on the back and all of that. Is there things that you're doing to help folks feel connected during this time of feeling unconnected or unplugged?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's obviously that disconnect that we has happened to us that you mentioned. We don't get that physical interaction, just the opportunity to shake someone's hand or be in the same room with them. At the other time, sometimes people feel too connected because suddenly, travel isn't necessary. So you don't have to spend hours on an airplane to get somewhere. And suddenly it feels like, well, I can spend every waking hour connecting with someone, but it's always through this medium that we're using now. So there's a bit of a dichotomy there. So part of that connection sometimes is actually helping people disconnect from the technology, because that can actually be a barrier. But one thing that we've done is, we've held on-site fitness classes since I started the program, over 10 years ago. We were able to transition rather quickly to have those classes be live virtually as well as on demand. But people really appreciated being able to connect with those folks they would see in the yoga class they were taking, or to see the instructor. And the connectivity that is allowed now is, we may be streaming a class out of our Dublin, Ireland office. Well, that's a class that anyone in the world can participate in. And so suddenly we're actually getting people that maybe sit in San Francisco or New York or Dublin getting a chance to connect with each other. So there's been opportunities to create more connection moments. But at the same time, I think it's important that we've also shared with people ways to connect with themselves, therefore disconnecting with the technology, because it can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm. So if I hear you correctly, folks who would normally just employees who would have access to your amazing programming, your fitness program, etc., now their family members can also be on the same Zoom class, and not only are you helping your employee, but there's more health at home during these times of struggle. That's great, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something else we did too. Obviously a lot of people have children, and we really couldn't offer like fitness classes to children because people weren't going to be bringing their children into the office. And again, not even touching issues like liability or whatnot. But we designed with our vendor partners around the globe. They started to design classes that children could be involved with. And so suddenly we could allow, maybe it wasn't the connection of colleague to colleague, but many times, I've heard people share with me too, just the opportunity to connect with their family more. Because, that's a great thing to do with someone, is a little bit of exercise. So you wouldn't just go for a walk or to take a class of some sort. So sometimes that familial connection has increased through different opportunities that we've been able to create for people.
Well, I think it's great that both family members have the opportunity to grow together. Whether it's, it's not like, the mom or the dad is getting these amazing classes and they're off in another work environment. And sometimes, that can grow apart. And, it's the health of the living room at home plays a huge role in regard to how we interact with everyone at the workplace. We bring our feelings to work every day. And I just think it's amazing that you can share, the great services that you offer, to a whole family, especially during these times of, let's just call it uncertainty.
No, I agree. And we're very proud of that, being able to do that for our folks.
If you had to talk a little bit about anxiety, when I talk about anxiety, I get nervous all the time because to me, when I get nervous, I feel like I should pay attention because I'm going to learn something. It's not like I'm not going to measure up, or I'm going to say the wrong thing, or I'm not equipped for this. Like when I start to feel that little thing in my belly, I'm like, oh man, I'm going to learn something new. Like this is great.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes beautiful things come in ugly packages, and it might come initially with a little anxiety, and trying to harness that energy in a mental way that produces expansion or neuroplasticity. I think that's right up your alley.
It is. I think that, anxiety is a very interesting phenomenon that people experience, right? Whether it be that we have a medical issue that causes anxiety, or we just have anxiousness, of what's coming in the future for us. And part of that to us really begins with, first of all, is awareness. Are you aware that you are feeling anxious?
Right.
And what do you do with that? When I felt anxious at times, until I learned different skill sets, you just do other things because you feel like you don't know why you're anxious. What's causing that? What is that? And then being able to sit with that and spend some time. But anxiety is very interesting, in its most basic sense. I think that the most common anxiety people have is an upcoming event that they are aware of. And then how do you turn that anxiety, which could be nervousness, into excitement? So can you rephrase that in your mind? So you're not anxious, but you're excited. And that can go a long way to helping people, change that paradigm in their head around that feeling.
Yeah, everybody's on a little live wire here. And, I think anxiety complicates the simplicity of the stressor. And, a couple ways I like to work with anxiety is just that simple breath that we do, which is in and out through the nose. And we simply inhale as slowly as we can to stabilize the mind. And then we hold the breath in for a 2 count. I'm not recommending depriving the brain of oxygen, but I want to stop that ticker tape flow across your brow that might not be the best languaging to apply to what is upcoming or ongoing in this moment. And then exhale slowly through your nose and get that parasympathetic response, the heart rate down, the blood pressure down. And then again, create a gap, just a nice mental opening. Hold out for a 2 count. So you have that ability to see that I can stop and start my mind on cue anytime I want to. I'm in charge of my mind. My mind is not in charge of me. And when we use a little bit of breath control with brief retentions, we can really assert ourselves as the mind is simply an informative opportunity. And where we place our attention plays a huge role in how we feel about ourselves, where we've been, where we are, and where we might want to go.
Ed, you taught me something, so I'm going to say it, and you can correct me if I misspeak. When we're not conscious, right, when we are just not present, our minds will dictate or can dictate the pace of our breath. But when we are conscious and we are in the present, it allows us to have our breath dictate the pace of our mind. And so an anxious mind is one that's like, it's just flurry, right? So I don't know what's happening next. Where am I coming from? Calm that down and using the breath in that regard. So that's something I believe you taught me, that the pace of your breath will dictate the pace of your mind. And I think that's a really powerful mantra. It has been for me to really enhance that, because when I feel those anxious mind, or that monkey mind, if I've heard it, we got a puppy. I'll talk about, you see a puppy, you're like, man, I feel like that puppy sometimes. Like, why is that puppy fixated on this golf ball? And then something else, it's like all the time. I'm like, man, I can learn a lot from this puppy, because that's how my mind feels like sometimes. But that mantra of the pace of your breath will dictate the pace of your mind. Does a lot for me to say, hey, let's go to my breath right now and use the technique that you just shared too to help calm that anxious mind.
Yeah, that's a great awareness. I really appreciate that plug. When we lose control of our breath, you've lost control of the moment. And you think you're completely present, but since you're hyperventilating, your heart rate's up and the brain senses danger, it goes back into our cerebellum. It pulls up an old file of something that has previously happened in our life, and it plays it as if it's actually happening in real life. So keeping control of the length, depth, pace of your respiration or breathing will be an exact replica of the length, depth, and pace of how your mind is working. In other words, yeah. So when you think about how long it takes you to inhale and how long it takes you to exhale, when you think about how much can you inhale, the depth of it, and how much toxicity can you exhale out, and what is the pace of your breathing? Is it slow? Is it fast? All of those will be a reflection of how you're working with the pictures and the words inside your mind. And no one ever wants to lose control of the mind. And noticing the triggers early on in the process. In other words, if you're sitting at your workplace and all of a sudden you begin to notice, I'm breathing rapidly. Why am I breathing rapidly? There's no physical risks of danger. I'm not in the gym. There's no lion in here with me. Pause and take a moment to take a look at what's in your mind. Your autonomic nervous system picks up that thought. The body doesn't know that it's just a thought. It thinks it's happening in real time. The body's energy is ignorant to whether something is real or an illusion. It's one of the kind of faults that we have in this amazing human thing. The body doesn't know the difference. So in other words, if you're thinking stress, anxiety, it's not going to work out, there's not enough for me, your heart rate and blood pressure are going to be up. You're going to start incinerating sugar stores, not fat stores. You're going to start to digest yourself. It's not good. When you begin to control the breath, you got the ability to control the mind.
That's it.
So it really is that simple, ladies and gentlemen. When I look at the various tenets that you have and how the breath interacts with, let's talk about sleep for a minute. And I know you have the great Nancy Rothstein on your sleep platform, but we can't seem to shut down. Every animal on earth is sleeping great, but humans. What's up with that?
We can't get out of our own way. A saying that Nancy taught me was, most people don't have sleep disorders. Most people have disordered sleep. And it has to do with our habits and routines that either support or detract us from getting good sleep. And something that else we like to share with people is that, good sleep starts in the morning, because it has to do with how we allow our natural energy systems with their rhythms that occur much more frequently, like 90 to 120 minutes. When we allow restful moments on a more natural cycle, we get better sleep. And I look at our population LinkedIn. Whenever I speak on sleep, I'll say to the room or the Zoom, how many people here have ever dropped their cell phone on their face? And almost everyone's hand goes up, because we're too attached to our technology. We're in bed, falling asleep, trying to answer an email or read an article, and boom, that phone drops out of your hand and smack on your nose. So I think a lot of times it has to do with habits. And I think it also has to do with not being aware of what things we're doing or not doing that are having that influence. Journaling is one of the most powerful things we can do for ourselves. It's also one of the most challenging things to do with consistency. One thing we try to teach people around sleep is pay attention. If it's journaling at the end of the day, what did you do today? And then we use those 6 tenets as a framework. So, what did you do from a thought? Did you have a mindfulness practice today? Did you do some conscious length, depth, pace breathing today? Did you drink proper amount of water and eat good food? Did you get some movement in your day? If you did all those things, okay, mark that you did or didn't, go to bed. Wake up in the morning and say to yourself, how do I feel? Do I feel rested? Because when you feel rested, that's the sign that you got good quality sleep. And you look back and go like, oh, look at that. I got a lot of steps in yesterday. I remember taking 2 of my meetings on walks as opposed to taking them sitting on my computer. And I ate some really good food. You know what? I actually didn't have alcohol after a certain hour, or I didn't have caffeine after a certain hour. And we start to be able to connect these dots and understanding what we're doing that's influencing our sleep positively or negatively. And then that brings change, because people when they can see that for themselves, right? They realize like, and sometimes we don't realize it until we put it on paper and we look and go like, every day that I either go to the gym or I get a right amount of movement, I sleep well. And on days that I don't, my sleep suffers. There's a eureka moment for a lot of people, just to make sure they instill some level of movement into their day to help them support in their sleep.
Yeah, sleep, it's a lot like going to the gym for your brain. We go to the gym during our conscious hours and we move our neuromuscular skeletal system, we detoxify ourselves. Sleep is for the brain. The brain doesn't sleep at all, but we give it time to see what has happened during our waking hours, and while we sleep, all that information will go back into the hindbrain and it'll be filed away in all the different cabinets and file cabinets and emails and platforms for that. And then the next morning you wake up, you have access to all those additional files being added on the skills that you've previously cultivated in your life. And when we get ourselves to the point where we can't fall asleep, there's something happening during the day that's disturbing the unconscious rhythm that every animal on the planet knows is so important to ourselves. So, there's certain little things, like for me, it's I'll sit on my bed or I'll lie down in my bed. It's a slow motion inhale. I don't want to agitate my mind. I want to get things calm. I'm not inhaling rapidly like I'm going to go do a workout. Slow motion inhale, slow motion exhale, and then pause before you inhale again. If you think about the exhale as a parasympathetic serotonin activity, and serotonin being a prerequisite for melatonin, which is the primary driver of sleep, just that little pause at the end of the exhale, you're going to amplify the serotonin. It's just a brief pause, and you also can place there in your mind maybe an intention. I would prefer a good night's sleep. I never want to beg. I never want to get aggressive with my mind, but I would prefer a good night's sleep. And then alternate nostril breathing is another great tool. And then talking about how the nasal channels affect the autonomic nervous system. We know we can inhale up the left and exhale out the right, and there'll be no sympathetic activity at all. There'll be no adrenaline and cortisol. So it's just dopamine, serotonin, all those things that get us to the space where we can go from conscious to unconscious.
I need mantras in my life because it's just things to remember. And something that I learned is that, we get stronger at rest. And I think that's such a powerful statement, because I don't know if that is intuitive. Because it is, if you think about exercise, right? No one is stronger on their third set than they are on their first set, right? And everyone gets that physically. Well, the same thing goes for our overall health and our overall bodies and minds when it comes to sleep. And I think there's a unappreciation of sleep when we're younger, and it isn't until we get a little bit older. And I remember when I was younger and I was a college football coach and had sales jobs, right? The hero was who could drink the most, stay up the latest, and be the first one in the office in the morning, or who can close the bar and be the first one in the gym. And there's this hero status around. I only need 3 hours of sleep. I don't need sleep. I can power through. Or sleep is for the dead, right? All this sort of macho, really aggressive type of, I can get sleep later. And I think that one is just an appreciation for how powerful it is. That, yes, our bodies are amazingly resilient, where you can suffer from a bad night of sleep and it's not going to totally wreck you. It's the consistency and the repetition with which we get these things. And to me, it's just when we really sit with that saying that we get stronger at rest, and when we appreciate that, it elevates sleep as a priority, I think, for people to say, I am going to take the time to uncover for myself, why am I not getting quality sleep? Once you appreciate it more, you start to do the things that are necessary to ensure that it meets the standard that you want in your life.
Yeah, I think you have to be interested, number one, in improving your sleep. If you're not interested, you're just going to continue to, spin your wheels.
Yeah.
When you think about sleep, it takes a tremendous amount of energy from the body to help the brain to feel safe enough to move from the beta waves, the gamma waves that we use at work, where we make decisions, we use strategies to move into these delta waves. And if we've exhausted ourselves during the day, we've taken too many breaths, the heart rate's been too high, we've had an inability to control the moment in a healthy way. When the body's exhausted, you're not going to be able to sleep at night because the brain still senses you're in danger. And it's going to be on some high alert that someone's going to break into your house, and you've got to be ready to hop into action quickly. So it's amazing the correlation between how it's all connected and how the 6 tenets tie it all together, both internally in our interpersonal perceptions with our external professional production.
I saw the question pop up on the screen. I want to just answer it, or at least give an answer to it. Someone asked around, I think, food for the brain. Is that?
Yeah.
So I learned something. I read an article or learned this through, I forget exactly who, but nothing is more disruptive to the brain than sugar, and nothing is more stabilizing to the brain than fat. And I love to use that because it's a great opportunity to talk about healthy fats for people. But as it comes to brain foods that are higher in fat. Now that doesn't mean, obviously going out and getting a bunch of hydrogenated fats or only eating fatty things, but right, sugar is very disruptive to the brain, and then fat is very stabilizing for the brain.
It gets tricky because we have the brain that wants to live on fat, and we got the body that wants to live on fiber. And we've got this breath trying to connect this whole thing together as one. And and everybody's a little bit different, but everybody's pretty much the same. It's a balancing act. And I think where you bring up, journaling, it's, okay, I didn't have a great night's sleep. Maybe I can take 30 seconds and jot down some things I did the day before, what I put in my body, what was my thought process, what was my schedule like, what was there things that I could do prior to my sleep. Just journal down, and then maybe take something off the table and see if that was it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest things I learned, I love coffee. I'm a coffee drinker, but it wasn't until maybe, 15 or so years ago that I learned about how long caffeine stays in your body and has an influence on, giving you a bit of a pickup. And knowing that hour, there's about 8 hours, I then started to change my coffee routine because I would have coffee whenever. I would just really, I'd have espresso after dinner or do whatever. When I started saying, okay, 8 hours, you're going to go to sleep at 10 o'clock, don't have coffee after 2. That was one of the things that I implemented in my life that had a great impact on my sleep, was just cutting caffeine off at 2 o'clock for myself. Now, I always encourage people to don't just take my word for it, try it for yourself. Everyone's different. Some people can have caffeine and it doesn't impact their sleep. But again, paying attention to what we do, what we put into our bodies, and seeing how it affects us is the most powerful thing we can do for ourselves.
I think that noticing is huge. Like, I notice if I drink this much caffeine, I'm sharp. And if I drink this much caffeine, I become dull. Yeah. And I think these little check-ins that you guys do at LinkedIn is so important because you have the ability just to, who doesn't have 2 minutes to pause? Okay, and you just pause, you slide back from the workplace, and you just dial back into yourself. And it's actually going to increase your productivity. As the left prefrontal cortex, where you process information at work cognitively, has a chance to cool down. It doesn't have to fix everything for 2 minutes. That right brain where we're intuitive, where we're curious, where we learn new things, that's a chance to heat up a little bit. And you kind of reboot the brain. You get that heart rate back down. And then you re-engage. Like 2 minutes goes a long way in just allowing your body, your brain, just to reboot itself. It doesn't have to be go, 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 go. It's just like, you were saying, guys, I can do this on 3 hours sleep. That's great, but what is that? Pain just creates more pain.
Yeah.
Pain never creates pleasure. That for you athletes out there. The idea is to continue to explore pleasure and push into pain and pull back the pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, my thing is noticing what's going on, making adjustments on the fly. One of the great things about the tenets at LinkedIn, in my opinion, is it gives people the ability to self-correct on the fly, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in those 4 platforms.
Yeah, I agree. It is a totality of us. I mean, we're doing these things all the time, paying attention to them, how they're impacting us, just raising awareness to it and being able to do something about it. Because everybody wants to be great at stuff. I mean, everybody wants to do that. It's just being able to believe you can and understanding that when you tap into yourself. And again, I also agree with you. I think the 6 tenets are tremendous. We use them both as program managers as a checklist to make sure we are rolling out a robust program, but it's also a daily checklist for people to, what did I do today? We need structure. I mean, humans, we need that structure. And if you say to someone, hey, go be well, they'll be like, well, where do I start? Where do I go? And so again, the tenets are here, start with these, right? These are the essence of our existence. Again, you're already doing these things. Pay attention to how well you're doing them and the impact that they're having on you.
Well, and every person who you bring in regard to your 6 tenets is an expert. This is not pedestrian programming. You're bringing in people at the top of the bell curve of everyone in there. And when you think about hydration, again, water, how much do I need? How much don't I need? Should I drink Gatorade? Is wine okay? All those things. When I start working with people, the first thing I make them aware of is, when you're mouth breathing, you're dehydrating yourself. When you're nostril breathing, you are hydrating yourself. Like, well, where'd you get that? Well, let me send you the science. Yeah. But it's really interesting because you have to stay hydrated. Oh, the body runs on this.
I think people get that when they're physically exerting themselves. I think where people lose that thought is, no one at LinkedIn has a physically, a challenging job, right? No, we don't have a manufacturing line. No one's working a jackhammer. So we don't necessarily have sweat. We're not working hard in that way. But we really try to help people appreciate that even the slightest bit of dehydration has a negative impact on your cognitive function. And everyone has cognitive, responsibilities to be sharp, or even just wanting to be sharp, so you can respond in a witty way to a comment or whatever. And really understanding that even the littlest bit of dehydration, again, not dehydration where you're like parched and your lips are cracked, but that has a really negative impact. And when we're trying to respond in stressful situations, to not say things we regret, to not send an email we wish we could take back, being properly hydrated is one of the most simplest things we can do for ourselves that has such a tremendous, long-lasting impact. And to speak what you mentioned too about 2 minutes, having 2 minutes, one of the biggest misconceptions people have, I think, around wellness practices is I don't have time. Because there's maybe a thought that it has to be a 1-to-1 ratio. Like I sat for an hour, so I should exercise for an hour. But the body is so amazingly transformative that it doesn't take that much time. As you said, 2 minutes can go a long way. It doesn't need to be that 1-to-1. And same with little simple things like hydration. Having that proper hydration, giving yourself those 10 seconds or 2 minutes, if that's all you have, has such a transformative aspect on our overall well-being. That we shouldn't dismiss it as not being worth it because it wasn't a huge time investment.
Wow. You said a lot in the last hour, my brother. You helped a lot of people.
Well, Ed, I think that what you've done for us, for me, since I met you, I want to say it was like 7 years ago in Washington, D.C. at a conference.
Yeah, we have more hair.
I think you've gotten younger since then. But, what I've been able to learn from you over the time and how valuable it is. And when we think about our own care, whether it be trying to reduce medical bills or keep those things low, the ability to use our breath as a tool to heal is just so immensely powerful. And I think so easily dismissed by people that the work you're doing to help bring this expertise to people and practices, I mean, I can't thank you enough. And I really think people in general can't thank you enough for just how valuable it is.
Well, I appreciate you. I look at you and everything you've done in your life and where you are and the people you're helping. you're kind of a 21st century sage in the corporate environment, always tinkering, looking for ways to improve things that we did last year and trying to make it better this year. And then there's going to be a catapult of that in the next year. It's not a destination, it's a journey. And we're always looking, we always want to do the best we can and be the best we possibly can be. But that's not a destination. That's a journey. It changes every day. And the idea is just be present. Just be present. Just show up.
Yeah.
You're overqualified to be great at whatever you do. And you support people in such a way. It's exemplary. And I'm just proud. I'm proud to know you and everything I've learned, but also the great group of people that you've facilitated at LinkedIn, Michael. So thank you very much.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care of that new puppy.
I will. Astrid Mochi. We'll make sure
There
she's
you
doing
go.
all right.
That's a bumper sticker or a license plate. I can one or the other.
And for all fans of The Office, you'll get why her name is Astrid. The boys named her after an episode of The Office. So there you go.
Thanks for spending an hour with our audience. You're one of the all-time greats, buddy. Appreciate you.
Back at you, man. Right back at you. You're a legend. Keep it rolling.
Thank you, man. Bye-bye.
See you, everybody.